Opinion about Zuma's concession that Mshe dropping charges did not make sense as the events unfolded yesterday at the Supreme Court of Appeal in Bloemfontein. Talk to us at Morning Live SABC. Let's hear your views on what happened yesterday at the Supreme Court of Appeal. At Morning Live SABC, it is our Twitter handle. Would love to hear from you. All right, as we've been reporting that yesterday, the Supreme Court of Appeal in Bloemfontein heard arguments on whether President Jacob Zuma should face the 783 criminal charges against him. In what appeared to be a turn of events, both the National Prosecuting Authority and President Jacob Zuma's legal teams have conceded that the decision to withdraw the charges was irrational. The oral arguments were to be heard over 2 days, but the court concluded the case yesterday, reserving judgment. Let us now cross live to our reporter who is outside the Supreme Court of Appeal in Bloemfontein, Aldrin Sampear. Aldrin, good morning to you. Talk to us first about the events yesterday. What tend to surprise many people?
Well, certainly, Palisa, as you were indicating that the days that have been set aside for the oral arguments to be heard was 2 days. And this morning, as we have planned before, is that we are expecting people to be streaming into this courtroom ahead of arguments, and today would have been the final day. But yesterday, we didn't even get to the entire day of arguments. By lunchtime, and even before lunchtime, the oral arguments were over, and that was because of a concession that came from President Jacob Zuma's counsel Kemp basically saying that he can't defend the decision that Mshe took at the time if it was based on the wrong interpretation of the law, and also conceding that it was irrational for him to have made that decision, and also arguing again that when Mshe dropped the charges and said it was on the basis of abuse of process, and arguing that the abuse of process was this discussion between Bulelani Ngcuka as well as Leonard McCarthy around the timing of serving the indictment, basically saying that that wasn't strong enough really to drop the prosecution of President Jacob Zuma. So those concessions that came through, quite interesting, and that's the reason why we stand here and wait now for judgment to be handed down. But I just want to bring into this conversation Lebohang Mokhele, who is an attorney also based here in the Free State. Quite an interesting day indeed. 2 days that have been set aside, but only we heard arguments up until midday, and this was basically because of these concessions that came through. Were these any surprising remarks for you?
Adrian, thanks for the opportunity, and good morning to the viewers at home. It was surprising in the sense that if the legal representative, for instance, Mr. Kemp, made such concessions in court, it means the concessions that he made in court, it's something that he might have foreseen even before the matter could even be brought to court. It might also even have given indication that the same concessions could have even been discussed with the client. But however, depending on the fact that obviously a legal representative in court would then have to appear in court based on the instructions of the client. And such concessions, rather the client would have said to him, make such concessions later on, or might have even advised him otherwise.
Because if you listen to the arguments, and Epstein, who was representing the NPA, during the arguments, during various questions that were being asked to him by the justices, he kept on saying, I want to see what my learned friend Kemp will make of this argument. I want to see what Kemp will make of this argument, and so forth. And then during Kemp's arguments, he stood up and then said, listen, even the Liebenberg case is totally against me.
No, definitely. And the most important about the Liebenberg case, it relates to the decision by the current NDPP, being the second appellant in this matter. Because we must also not forget the fact that the time Mshe took the decision not to prosecute Mr. Zuma, he was the acting NDPP. And then there were other various NDPP that even came after him, up until Mr. Shone Abrams was appointed as the NDPP. And on the same level, the Liebenberg case says that if the people are on the same level or position, they cannot review or bring an application to review. At best, what Shone Abrams should have done is to bring an application just to correct that decision of Mshe and say that that decision was irrational. Indeed, Mr. Zuma should face the might of the law.
And now we hear from President Jacob Zuma's counsel that they want representation, they want an opportunity to make representation. J. Kemp was even saying that if the decision taken by Mkotedi Mshe was irrational, then someone must take a rational decision. And when that rational decision is being taken or even considered, President Zuma wants an opportunity to state his case before even a decision is being taken to go ahead with the prosecution.
Aldrin, let's start with the issue of the representations. We have two appellants in this matter, be Mrs. Zuma as well as NTPP. If Mrs. Zuma, for instance, he gets an opportunity to submit the representations, the second appellant being the NDPP would still have to consider such representations. And now the question would be that if then the said representations are then made to the NDPP being the second appellant, the question would still stand: would he be objective and consider them and be rational and also be judicial and also say that indeed Mrs. Zuma should also face the might of the law? That would be the main question. And again, we must also not lose sight of the fact that in February 2009, if I'm not mistaken, there were first representations that were made by Mrs. Zuma. The said representations were declined. Again, after the spy tape saga, he also made viva voce representations, which were also declined. And again, if we say that he must be given an opportunity to submit the third representations, how many opportunities must he be given to submit representations? And again, it will also boils down to the fact that even if he gets an opportunity to submit representations, who would still have to decide on the said representations? Because the same person who still has to decide on them is the same person that since the same tune that Mr. Zuma is also saying.
And just listening to the NPA now, Epstein representing the NPA, saying that Sean Abrams wants a direction. When the court hands down the order, they want a direction, they want clarity to state exactly what it is the court expects of Sean Abrams. And I wonder how this then works, because now you have the issue around the separation of power. Can a court really instruct Sean Abrams and say that you must prosecute Jacob Zuma? There's no need even to go through a representation.
The issue of separation of powers is very key in this matter, because we must also understand the fact that the court cannot interfere in the administrative functions of the NDPP. And such decision by Sean Abrams is an administrative decision. The only time that the court would only intervene in such a decision is only when there's an irregularity up until the decision has been taken. But in this matter, the court cannot compel or even give a directive as to what Sean Abrams should or must do in terms of their representations in the event that Mr. Zuma will then submit the representations to him.
Let's quickly speak about Mkotedi Mshe's conduct and the rationality of the decision that he took. But this court particularly, I'm listening to Justice Kachalia very, very hard on Mkotedi Mshe, saying that he either didn't know what he was doing or he didn't apply his mind. There was also the issue around the plagiarizing the Hong Kong judgment. And, you listen to these arguments that are being made by the justices, and these arguments are made even before the judgment is being handed down. And then on the other hand, you have the High Court judgment by Deputy Judge, the full bench of the North Gauteng High Court, speaking about the conduct of Mkotedi Mshe and how he failed to apply his mind at that time as well. And this does indeed speak to the credibility of Mkotedi Mshe, because he is currently a High Court judge in the Northwest.
That's the same question that I've been asking myself. We're speaking about a person who was the acting NDPP at the time. And when he took the decision not to prosecute the president, the decision should have been taken rationally, should have been taken judicially. And by is an officer of the court. If he's going to decide not to prosecute him and apply wrong provisions of the Criminal Procedure Act, that clearly boils down to his credibility. Currently, even as a permanent judge of the Northwest High Court, he's also an acting judge of the Land Claims Court. And one would also think, in the event that there is an application that can be brought by any interested party and say that he should be impeached, we must also realize that in that event, that would be the first case that will even be brought in the courts in South Africa. And should that matter be successful, that will also be the first judgment or ruling that can then be arrived upon by any court in the country.
Well, certainly interesting, this court case. Many firsts in this court case. Thank you so much, Lebogang Mokele, an attorney here in Bloemfontein. As I've indicated, many firsts in this matter. If that does happen, that there's an application to impeach Mkotedi Mshe, that would be a first, as Lebogang has just indicated. But also, if the NPA decides to go ahead with President Jacob Zuma's prosecution, that will be the first time that we have a president, a sitting president, who will be facing a criminal charge and have these criminal cases, these corruption charges to answer to in a court of law. And I wonder then, how does that play out, considering that he is a sitting president? Certainly a case that we will all be watching quite closely in the outcome of this case and the final decision that will be taken eventually by Sean Abrams on how this matter will go forward. It's back to you in studio.
Aldrin, thanks very, very much for that, and to your guest as well. Let's just quickly take a look again at the question of the day this morning, again focusing in on what's happening at the Supreme Court of Appeal. What is your opinion about Zuma's concession that Mokotedi Mshe dropping charges did not make any sense? Give us your views. We'd love to hear them. Please do tweet us at Morning Live SABC. All right, as you know, this month, not just today, this month is Tourism Month. That's being September, and we're going to be crossing over to KwaZulu-Natal.